All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to One Soccer. I'm your host for today, Josh Deming. I'm joined by Alex Gonke-Ruzic. And today we have a few different topics to touch on today's live stream. We have CPL playoffs. We have the Canadian Women's National Team's friendly coming up against Spain. We'll chat with you guys as well and kind of go through the playoff picture for the Canadian Premier League. And today's stream is sponsored by tonybet. So big shout out to them. Alex, we have a big matchup coming up in the Canadian Premier League. We have York United against Pacific. Let me know how you're doing today. Let me know your initial thoughts on that matchup.
Yeah, it's playoff season. I mean, we kind of got a taste of it yesterday over in Montreal. Unfortunately, CF Montreal. Heck of a game, though, right? Just the Atlanta goes up 2-0, kind of against the run of play. Montreal just were so lacking defensively, but then they turned it up second half, get one through Joseph Martinez. Bit of a howler from Brad Guzan. And then penalty, and Brad Guzan and Martinez giving it to each other. And after the game, it was good to see them hug it out, the former teammates. But the spirits flying high. But yeah, in the penalty shootout, Montreal just didn't look as confident as Atlanta on the spot kicks. Every Atlanta kick was well taken, and Montreal falls. But hey, that's the beauty of playoffs. It's just that something about elimination games where all's to play for. You know, it can lead to these fun games where it's roller coasters, strong start, strong finish, you have nothing to lose, and it gets me excited for York Pacific. This is a game where, you know, at the end of the day, one team's going to be, you know, celebrating in the dressing room and getting ready for a trip to Ottawa, and the other team's going to be already, you know, mourning the end of a season and what could have been for them. And the same goes out in, you know, the West Coast, Vancouver Whitecaps, Portland Timbers. Like, you know, there's a lot of Canadian involvement in the playoffs this week, or I guess in the MLS case, not really playoffs, more the play-in, but certainly CPL tonight. It's playoffs, and it's going to be a good game between York and Pacific. I'll tell you that.
Now, I didn't know we were going to get off track immediately, but I mean, I do like that you went over to the Impacts game. So I want to ask you, because, you know, you're a West Coast boy, you follow the Whitecaps very closely. For any of the viewers out here who maybe didn't follow the situation as closely as you might have, or anyone out in the West Coast, can you explain what exactly happened with the Vancouver Whitecaps and the fact that basically I don't think anyone in the organization really wanted to finish 8th place, because they would run into a situation that made them look bad, probably annoyed the league and annoyed the fans. So you want to just give everyone a little update on the situation in Vancouver?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they dropped to 8th place, and 8th place had to play in game this week, as they've been saying. And that was determined to be Wednesday. The only problem with the Whitecaps and Wednesday is that BC Place, you know, which I think is publicly funded stadium out here, and it's not owned by the Whitecaps. It's owned by Pavco Pavilion Company. They rented out the stadium 16 months ago. So not even like 12 months ago, like 16 months ago, before anyone could have known what was going on in October for a motorbike show. And they need from Wednesday, so from today on till Saturday, to prep, have the event, and then I guess unprep. So the Whitecaps couldn't have any games between Wednesday and Saturday. The venue was available yesterday, but MLS nixed that because they needed the Eastern team to play yesterday, because Miami was in a standalone game on Friday against the winner of yesterday's match to open the playoffs, because they wanted the Messi effect, etc. For some reason, they couldn't do a doubleheader of, you know, the Eastern team plays at 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern, and then the Western team plays at 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern. So instead, the Whitecaps had to forfeit the game, the hosting of the game, to Portland, the 9th place team, because the Whitecaps offered alternatives like, can we play at Starlight? Can we play at Willoughby? Can we play at Swangard? They're like, nope, too small, doesn't meet the venue requirements, VAR, etc., all that stuff you need to have. So now they're playing a home game in Portland. So it's like it's the COVID bubble all over again. So quite the story.
It is quite the story. And I mean, I noticed it right away once it was announced, but I mean, the West Coast fans were not happy. My ex that day was filled with just fans saying their displeasure, the fact that this is a situation where we're going into a playoff game. We're supposed to be the home game. I also, you got to feel for some of the fans who miss out on a home playoff game, because if they lose to Portland, they don't get the opportunity. But if they do win, they will host LAFC, at least, for one of the two matches. So I think everyone in that organization is praying for the fact that they defeat Phil and his Portland Timbers and are hopefully able to host that home
Portland, all those Canadians. Crepeau, Miller, McGraw, Pantemis. We'll see. It's a battle of two teams that know each other well. And I mean, hey, the Whitecaps, one thing they'll be watching for. Last year they were eliminated by Crepeau, and they were booing him, and they're, because of course there's a bit of bad blood of how he left. Man, I'm sure they'd be loving to get a little revenge by eliminating Crepo this time around.
Could have been a bit of a hostile environment if the game was played in Vancouver, but I guess Crepo will avoid that right now. It'll be interesting though. I mean, and the Portland fans are insane as well, like incredible fan base out there. So I'm sure that they'll pack the house and make it very difficult for Vancouver, but it should be fun. If you guys are joining us today, say hello in the chat, drop a like. We're touching on the Canadian Premier League playoff picture, the women's national team friendly coming up, and we're chatting a little bit of MLS as well, because the Whitecaps have their playoff game coming up away from home, and we just watched the Impact get eliminated. So, Alex, let's move back over to the game that's coming up in the CPL. York United, they take on Pacific. I'm just looking at the last 5 matches, and it actually sums it up really nicely, because 5 matches ago was playoffs last year, where Pacific at home defeated York United 1-0. I know that doesn't mean much coming into this picture, but the next 4 games were the regular season. Pacific won 2-0, York at home. York won 2-0 at home. Pacific drew York 1-1 and then at home, and then Pacific won away 2-1. So on the season, Pacific got the better of York, and in the playoffs last season, Pacific got the better of York. This time, though, they are the away team. If you had to say who the favorite is, who do you like going into this one?
Yeah, I think right now, Pacific enters with the form edge for sure. I think that helps a fair deal heading into the playoffs, right? Just because you never really want to back into the playoffs unless you're Forged, because for whatever reason they just have this magical switch that we haven't discovered how to use yet, where it just playoffs, boop, hit the button, hit that mode. But it helps because York right now, they're entering the playoffs. Their last 10, 2 wins, 2 draws, 6 losses. So they've kind of stumbled in a bit. They've had a lot of injury suspensions. Feels like it's been ages since they've been able to get their best 11 together. For what it's worth, sounds like they should have something close to it tonight. Like Mobabuli was injured for a bit. He's back. Brian Wright wasn't fully fit, but he looks like he'll be good to go. Like Max Ferrari, I think should hopefully be good to go. Frank Sturring made his return this weekend. I know he's missed a bunch of time with injury. They'll be missing probably Noah Batna unless he surprises and returns. But for the most part, they got a few key guys they were missing. But it's funny for Pacific, it's the opposite. Like throughout the middle of the year, they were so injured, for lack of a better way, like so many key injuries, and now like they're about as healthy as they've been all year long. They've got Adonijah Reed fully fit and going again. Josh Hurd's back. That was a big one. He missed 8 weeks with a bit of a knee injury. They've got a full available squad, barring, of course, Ali Indom, who's been out for the season. And I think Cedric Toussaint might not be able to feature today against his old team, although who knows, maybe the last few days were positive. That was just as of the weekend. And Pacific has a record of 4 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses in their last 8 heading into this one. So they come in with a bit of form. And the last time these two teams met, Pacific had a nice comeback win over York, which was huge for Pacific's morale, because that was the only win Pacific got all year when trailing first. So that was a bit of a momentum booster for them.
Yeah, I was looking at the last 5 matches leading into this, and that what I was going to touch on before you did. And York has the 1 win in 5, and you touched on their record in 10. Pacific, it's not like they have the most incredible record in their last 5, 2 wins, 2 losses, and a draw, but it's the last 2 matches leading into playoffs, like you mentioned. I mean, the win against York, 2-1, and then a 1-0 win against Forge just to really solidify their playoff position. They are a team that's feeling pretty good. And I'm wondering, going into this match, knowing that Atletico Ottawa is waiting at home for the winner, which club do you think has more pressure on them? Do you think it's York hosting a playoff game here? They've been a team where the crowd, the numbers aren't really up to what they are around the league. And then there's Pacific with some of the ownership situation that's going on there. Which organization do you think it could really use this win? It could maybe really use a playoff run long term.
York, 100%. I think York, they're going to want to use this as a bit of a chance of the first year, new owners. They obviously made a big move in the middle of the season, bringing in Benjamin Mora. We'll see if he's around long term, because of course there's been some rumors of Chivas looking at him, which, hey, credit to Mora and good for the CPL that clubs like Chivas are keeping an eye on the league, albeit the Mexican link of Mora helps in that regard.
Just lost their manager as well to Boca Juniors, so
exactly. So wasn't it Fernando? Wasn't it Gago who was
Yeah, it
the
was.
Chivas coach? I was
Yeah,
gonna say, because I was
he
like, that makes sense.
just left to go to Boca Juniors. That was rumored for a few weeks, and Boca's had a slow start in the league and picked them up. So, there's an opportunity there for a young manager that's thriving in CPL. But yes, Alex, didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to let you you mentioned Chivas, and I just saw the story that Fernando Gago left. So there is actually like a legitimate opportunity for him maybe to go on a nice playoff run and maybe get a big move.
Yeah, well, that's it. Gago goes home to Argentina. Who knows? Maybe Mora will go home. But I'm sure if you're York fans, you don't want him to go home, because he's obviously been a huge add to that team in terms of the environment, the energy, what he's brought to that group. I think York's going to see this as a building opportunity to get that first home playoff game. The crowds have been getting better and better as the year has gone on. They've done a good job of building a good atmosphere. Like some of the last games where it was fun, it was rowdy, you could hear it on the broadcast. I would love to see what that would have sounded like in the stadium. And I think York's constantly, feels like over the last 3 years, every year you enter the year, they're like, oh, they've got a good team, York, but then something wasn't just clicking, and it feels like now they've found that recipe. Well, this would be a good way to build, show they can, okay, they got to win, they win a round, etc. I think for Pacific, of course, internally there's a certain level of pressure, because Pacific knows for their history that they've built over this short time in the CPL, where hey, they've made the playoffs 5 years in a row, but this is the first time since year one that they finished lower than the top four. They won't host a playoff game this year. Pacific's also probably thinking like, okay, this was a bit of an underwhelming year. You can make up for that by winning a round or two, and you're kind of back to the semifinal or something like that. But I think York will have more pressure, even though Pacific, I think internally, you could argue, it feels like York, there's more external pressure. Pacific, there's more internal pressure within their group.
I agree with that 100%. We got some comments coming in as well from the chat. So if you guys are with us, feel free to toss in some comments. I'll try to do my best to get to them. But I like this one from Mike McDonald, because we were just talking about Mora potentially leaving, and we don't know anything. I mean, there's a chance maybe he does stay. There were rumors that Chivas was looking at him, and then, like we just mentioned, Chivas's manager goes over to Boca Juniors. So there is an opening potentially once this season wraps up. If it does happen, Mauro Eustachio taking over York United. What do you think? What do you think of that, Alex? Do you think that? I mean, I think it'd be such a lovely story to see, and he's been rewarded. Coming into a Canada camp. I kind of like it if Mora leaves, to leave it to Eustachio. Do you think he's up for the challenge, and do you like the fit?
That would be huge, just because Mauro Eustachio would represent something pretty good for the CPL, and that's a generation of guys who started in the league and kind of set a culture in year one, right? Like, I still remember Eustachio playing in the middle of the park for Cavalry before he made the move over to York. For him to go from player to assistant, to now coaching would be huge. And I mean, there's a few other guys around the league that we're keeping an eye on, right? Like, you feel like it's only a matter of time before David Edgar gets a look, be it with Forge or elsewhere, just because of the environment he's been in there. Nick Ledgerwood is another one you hear a lot of at Cavalry, and going from their captain to a key piece there with Tommy Wilden Jr. But it would be good, because I mean, that's ultimately what you want for the CPL down the road, for guys to play in the league, to either springboard their careers like Kwasi Poku has, like a Joel Waterman, Lucas McNaughton, Victor Latourie, all these guys. But also you'd like for some of them to parlay that into jobs off the field, like in management. I know Cavalry has done a good job as well. Like Oliver Minitel was one, for example, who was in the front office there, then coaching and even media, right? You got Jordan Wilson over here at One Soccer. He, once upon a time, was terrorizing midfielders in the CPL, and now he's been so great to have here on the channel. Hey, Eustachio in that regard is great. I mean, of course, in terms of his credentials, I think that he's learned from a Mora, he's learned from a Nash. I think there's a certain level of experience there, and it'd be a big jump right away. But I think the fact that he has a bit of that familiarity as an intern, he's been around this group, I think he'd be ready to step up and grab the reins. And being around Jesse Marsh as well was something you mentioned, which you can't forget.
Yeah, I love the story. I mean, a young manager coming into the league, Canadian, his brother's playing for the national team. He was, like you just mentioned as well, was with Jesse Marsh in the national team. It just kind of seems like this would maybe be the play and worth maybe rolling the dice a little bit to give him an opportunity here with York. And then, and just to mention Jordan Wilson, because he's done a fantastic job at One Soccer. But my favorite memory of Jordan since he's been here was one of the York games. He was there as a fan, just watching, and the camera went to him, and he was drinking a Summersby, but he was I think he was kind of trying to hide, didn't really want too much attention, and the cameras found him, and he just like quickly hid. It was hilarious. It was I remember I was doing that game, and I clipped it and shared it, and it got quite a few interactions. It was funny. But anyways, moving on to the next question. Late to the party. What's up, guys? Forge gonna take it, and Cap's gonna win tonight, then beat LAFC finally. Wow. So I'm gonna do it. Oh, do you want to? I was asking.
I just said, "Wow, okay." I like the confidence. That's good.
I was gonna ask you, Alex, to rate them in likelihood. 3 bold statements. Well, I don't know, bold statements. Some. I mean, Forge are probably the favorites again. So Forge winning it once again. Caps winning tonight, and Caps beating LAFC. Rank them in likelihood of what you think we could see. I'd probably put it in that order if I'm honest.
I think I'd put it in that order. I think Forge winning is not far-fetched. This is probably one of, if not their best version of their team. It feels like the most complete version of this Forge, top to bottom, in terms of just the players they have at every position across the roster, what Bobby Smyrniotis brings at the top. They finish first, huge advantage, as we know. They've been dominant at home. Like, this is really all set up here for Forge to, go in and go get that 5th title. So Forge, I think, would probably be the most likely. Whitecaps beating Portland, I'd put second. Like, I think it's a pretty strong chance. Portland's a bit of a weird one because they're absolutely loaded in the attack, but they've been pretty horrific defensively at times this year. So this could be a very wide open game, which, funnily enough, suits the Whitecaps, who've struggled a bit in different kinds of games. So, well, I think they'll be able to put a good account of themselves. And LAFC, it's tough because, for my money, for what I've seen of LAFC from, just the roster, their stats, I think they're the most complete team in the West. And I think I remain of the school that I think the Whitecaps would have had a better chance had the Galaxy dropped or kept the first place. But then, as you know, Galaxy conceded a 101st minute goal on decision day, or whatever the heck it was, 97th minute goal to drop from first to second. And I think if you're the Whitecaps, you weren't too happy that Houston did that to the Galaxy. I think you'd rather play the Galaxy than LAFC. So it's not impossible, but I think it's going to be tough just because LAFC is so good across the board. They're good defensively. They're good attacking. They have Buonga. Then they got Bogush, all these great players. Like, it's going to be a tough series if they even get past Portland tonight. Yeah,
I don't like the matchup. LAFC, I 100% agree. If I'm a Whitecaps fan, I want Galaxy every day of the week. I do like. I mean, in ranking these, I said I would just stick. The boring answers, I'd stick with it. But I don't hate putting the Caps defeating Portland first, and then Forge, and then LAFC. Like, I think that could go either way as well. I think the Whitecaps have a good opportunity. Just they just fell into this playoff picture in horrible form, and it's tough one to go into a playoff picture like that. So I don't know. Our friend here seems pretty confident. He says Vanny got to put in his best 11. We will see Armstrong, Gold, White, Fafa all in the starting 11. Do you think we'll see all 4 of them in the starting 11, Alex?
No, I don't think we'll see Armstrong. I think Armstrong you'll want to save as a super sub, just because even in the regular season, it's clear that, and I mean, it's not his fault because it's the time he was signed, and maybe his age as well. He struggled to keep up with the pace of the regular season. Playoffs, you saw it in Montreal, Atlanta. It's a different intensity, a different energy. You saw it in RSL as well. And Caps' decision day, I don't think Armstrong's in. I mean, Golden White will be there, which will be a huge boost. And we'll see about Pico. He's kind of slumped to end the year. He missed a penalty on decision day. He hasn't, he scored for Haiti recently, so that was a bit good to see. But we'll see if he's in the lineup tonight, because Vanni Sartini might also want to use him as a super sub, which could also be useful in a game like this. So we'll see. Well, Golden White feels like the only guarantee I could give out of those 4.
All right, Alex, I have a question that I saw on X, and I can't remember where it started. I'm just typing it out right now. and let me know what you think. It's gonna, any sports fan, anyone in the chat, let me know what you think as well, and let me know where you think you heard it from, because I was in California, so I just remember it popping up, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I can't remember who touched on it, but if Forge win the North Star Cup this season, will they be the best Canadian sports dynasty of all time? Did you see that on X circling around?
Some big call.
I know. I saw it. I saw in the comments. I looked at it quickly. Someone mentioned the Oilers team back in the day.
The Oilers was 4 straight in the 80s.
4 straight. There was I think
Montreal Canadiens teams that won like 4 or 5 in a row or something. But yeah,
there's also a CFL team. I can't remember now which one it was that won. I think 5 in a row. Was it the Elks? Maybe back then, or maybe it was Calgary's team. I can't remember. If anyone who's watching right now knows the CFL team that won 5 in a row, I guess we could quickly Google it. But let us know, if Forge win the North Star Cup this season, will they be the best Canadian sports dynasty of all time? If not, give us some examples. We just mentioned a few. It's difficult because of, I don't know. You go, Alex.
I think what I would say is like the big thing that Forge would deserve credit for. Look, I think it'd be unfair just to right away throw out that, okay, they're the best dynasty of all time, just because there's over 150 years. You've seen some crazy periods of dominance, but I think what Forge would deserve credit for is like the fact when they're doing it in a time where it feels like just sports are as competitive as ever, right? Like the technology is as high, as good as it's ever been. All the teams in the league have access to things they wouldn't have had before. It's a salary capped league too, so it's not like there's huge advantages. The fact that Forge has been able to constantly, they reached 5 straight finals. They've won 4 of them. They've won 2 regular seasons. They've been a CONCACAF a bunch. For them to do that in the modern era is unprecedented, because you see it in a lot of leagues where it's so tough to maintain 2, 3, 4 good years of excellence. So I think when you consider those things in terms of Canadian sports dynasties, it definitely feels like they'd have the modern era pretty, like, it'd be hard to think of many other teams in like the modern era, like the last 30, 40 years, who you'd put in that same discussion, because it's also, and it's also a very nuanced discussion, because a lot of these teams that might have dominated the 60s, 50s, right, they would have had huge built-in advantages, such as like the Canadians. They were just like, you hear some of these stories of how they were up dominating the NHL in the 60s, 70s, because they had GMs who were preying on these expansion teams that didn't know better, and they do things like, here, you want this veteran that is really good in exchange for your first overall pick, and the guy's like, oh yeah, he's a great player, we'll give you the first overall pick, and then Montreal would go like pick someone like Guy Lafleur with that, and turns out like that guy the Canadians gave him like has a knee problem and kind of retires a year or two later, and they're like, oh, how did we get bamboozled like that? And you don't really get stories like that anymore. Like Forge isn't going around bamboozling guys and doing things like that to the other team. So the fact that they've maintained that dominance by purely growing within, you definitely would have to put it up there.
Yeah, I agree. I won't speak too much on it, because I would need to look at a lot of the other examples out there that were mentioned under the tweet that I got this question from. What I will say, to Alex's point, modern era makes it different. And looking back at the other examples, because I don't know right off the top of my head, I don't know exactly how many teams were in the league, but I saw under the comment section some were saying like, well, there's only 8 teams in the Canadian Premier League, 7 at the very beginning. Maybe there's not enough sample size. It'd be different if they did it in a league of 20, for example. But then they gave examples of, but I don't know the CFL one, but they gave examples, at least the Canadians and and the Oilers, that was years ago. So I don't even know how many teams were in the league back then, because their point was, well, there's not that many teams, but there's a lot to be put into it. One thing I can say, if they do win this year, that's 5 titles and 1 final and 6. I mean, you don't get much better than that. They're consistent all the way, and they're a team where it doesn't really matter where they finish in the regular season. When it comes playoff time, they're a different breed, and this is an organization filled with winners. So I think they're up there. I think it's a fun debate. I'm probably not the best one to have that conversation with because I don't follow the CFL that closely. So maybe someone who follows that quite a bit and maybe is a little bit older and has experience with those Canadians and Oilers team would be someone interesting to ask. But they'd also have to be familiar with Forge. So we'll see. But we will move on to Atletico Ottawa. They are waiting the winner of York United and Pacific. They're going into playoffs, Alex. I mean, they're going into the season with a ton of pressure. They brought in some big stars when the early predictions were coming in. A lot went with Forge because, they're Forge. They know how to win, but a lot were looking at this Atletico Ottawa side being like, they stacked up. They're going all in. This is the team to beat. They got off to a great start. They have not been in great form going into playoffs right now. Last 5 games, they have 1 win, 3 draws, 1 loss. I think they would have at least expected to finish top 2 to give them a chance to host the final. It was probably up there for the taking and going into that last 5 matches where they kind of let it slip and Cavalry took it. So this is a team that kind of limped into 3rd place. They will host a home game, but then they will have to go into a semifinal and a final against Cavalry/Forge, whatever it may be. What do you think about this Atletico team, Alex? Do you like their odds of taking on one of York and Pacific, moving on, and then being able to take down Cavalry or Forge?
It depends. Are you a glass half full guy or a glass half empty? Because
I don't know.
What I'd look at is their last 10 games. Ottawa, if you're glass half full, they've only lost 1 of their last 10 games. Pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. The only problem is if you're glass half empty, they've only won 3 of their last 10 games. They drew 6 of them, an astonishing 6 games. They end up finishing, 6 points behind Forge. You're probably thinking, man, you turned 3 of those draws into wins, and you're tied for Forge. Really, those draws proved to be costly, and there were some frustrating ones in there, like Halifax got them late at home. I was covering that game a few weeks ago. There's some other Ottawa games. But I think what's good news for them is that draws really hurt you in the title race. Like Cavalry, for example, what's ridiculous, Cavalry only lost 4 times this year, and all 4 losses were by 1 goal. Like, that's actually kind of wild if you think about it, right? Like,
well, I mean, you look at the top 2 teams, or the second and third place team, to your point, Alex. I mean, they both have 12 wins, 12 draws, and then Atletico Ottawa's got 11 wins, 11 draws. There was a ton of draws this season, but especially by the second and third place team, which is a big reason why they fell under Forge, because both had less losses than Forge.
Exactly, and that's it. Like, Cavalry had 4 losses, but they didn't win the title because they drew way too many games. And similar for Ottawa, right? Like, they didn't actually lose that many games, but they didn't turn enough draws and wins. And in a season where, this isn't hockey, this 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw, it's great, right? You reward teams that win, and, a draw is still valuable, but it hurts you in the overall context. But the good news for those 2 teams is that heading in the playoffs, draws aren't a bad thing, because draws means you're not losing, and not losing means you'll take games to extra time at the very least. You'll take games to penalties. And what I think is probably the biggest reason why I think Ottawa will still feel comfortable is that big games are decided by big players, and I think they can look to a bunch of their guys and be like, all right, even though that maybe hasn't been the case over the last 10 games, 15 games, they've got guys who can win games. Like, I think you trust Manny Aparicio to step up in a big game and do something for you. Ollie Bassett, Ruben Del Campo, just short of the Golden Boot, but you saw him score some big goals, especially early in the year. Like, of his 11 goals, like, a lot of them were in big wins. Like, he wasn't scoring in blowouts or anything like that. He was scoring the first or second goal on a key 2-1, 2-0 win. You back a lot of those. Balou Tabla. They've got a lot of options. Sam Salter's really heated up lately, in my opinion. Debrienne. And I think that bodes well, that they're not losing. So I think heading in the playoffs, they can kind of feel confident that they're not going to go and struggle in that regard. And I think when the game's cagey, the game's tight, they've got guys who can decide a match. So I think for Ottawa, as long as they can get past this York or York or Pacific side heading into that semifinal, I think Ottawa would fancy their chances. And if they get back to a final, they'll have a lot of experience having been to a final just 2 years ago.
Who do you think they want between York and Pacific? If you look at the record this season, Atletico against Pacific, they won 2, lost 1 and drew 1, but against York, York won 3 and lost 1. So clearly York has had Ottawa's number this season. Do you think that matters when it comes down to the playoffs? And I mean, if you just go off that, I assume that Ottawa would want Pacific, but is there any reason do you think they may want York?
Pacific eliminated Ottawa across 2 legs in the Canadian Championship.
That is true. I didn't touch on those games, but I did see that here. But yes, anyways, sorry, Alex, go ahead.
So it's not like, Pacific did get that one up over them. So I think it's tough because either or. I mean, selfishly, I'd hope they'd want York because, I mean, after what Benjamin Mora and Carlos Gonzalez were saying to each other after their last meeting, I think we maybe need some more fireworks between those two in the playoffs. So we'll see if York can get it done. Because, with Pacific, really both of them, Pacific and York, play a similar style. And I think Ottawa will look at that kind of low block. Ottawa has struggled at times to break down those low blocks. This Ottawa team's looked at their best when the game's open. They get their guys running into space. Yeah, I'd probably say, I think on paper, based on what you said, I think they want Pacific, but I think this York one might be more appetizing because as Pacific showed them Pacific can kind of turn it up for these big games, whereas for York, they kind of have to prove that they can still do that. Whereas Pacific, you kind of feel like they we talked earlier about Forge hitting that switch. Feels like Pacific has shown in past years that they haven't, maybe not that level of a switch, but they still have a switch they show in the playoffs. Like last year, right? They struggled. They barely made it. Like they made it in as the 4th place team, and then boom, they hit the switch. They beat York. They beat Halifax. All of a sudden, they were in a semifinal. Like Pacific has that in them. So I think Ottawa ultimately would want York.
I think that's fair. I agree. Now, before we move on to the Canadian women's national team, I do want to bring up Tobias Wershesky. I mean, I think he deserves a little bit of credit here. That gives us a small opportunity to touch on Cavalry as well. But the 89th minute of the last game of the season, I mean, leading into the game against Valor, he needed 2 goals to win the Golden Boot. He scored 1, had the penalty in the 89th minute. He walked away as the lone winner of the CPL Golden Boot with 12 goals, just getting ahead of Del Campo. He played for Edmonton, had a pretty decent season in that crazy year for FC Edmonton, their last one where they had a ton of loan players. Didn't play in 2023 in the CPL, comes back for 2024 and scores 12 goals. He's looked great. Tell me, is this a surprise to you? Because I went out at the beginning of the season when we were talking about who could potentially be the Golden Boot winner. And I don't remember who it was from One Soccer. It could have been KJ, it could have been Ollie. I don't really remember. Someone, I believe, put Wershesky as the Golden Boot winner. So if we figure out which one of them it was, shout out. I didn't think he was going to lead the way. I was thinking around that 6-7 goal mark, like a comfortable season, similar to his season with FC Edmonton. He really surprised me this year. What did you make of his season, and how important will he be if Cavalry are going to go on to win this title?
Yeah, it's funny because I think on one hand, I'm not surprised at all because Wershesky is one of the most technically gifted players we've seen play in this league. Like he's just an incredible freak of nature, the way for his size, the way he can, control a football, he can strike a football, his positioning, all that. You just didn't know, right? Like he hadn't played for a year. Sometimes that could be tough to get right back into the rhythm of the professional game. But it feels like this Cavalry team's been a fit because Wershesky put up some pretty good numbers on Edmonton despite their struggles. He had something like he led the league in assists, which is impressive because Edmonton struggled to score goals. So the fact that he was finding, I think maybe this was 21 when he led the league in assists, I want to say. Like he's always shown that he can be dangerous on some struggling Edmonton side. So I'm also not surprised with that too, that, all of a sudden you have a Moosey, you can feed you Camargo, Aird, all these options that they have that can be creative, that he would thrive because he's always shown that ability to fill the net, to have a good touch, to finish. So great pickup from Cavalry. Like you lose the Meyer Bevan Golden Boot winner last year, Golden Boot winner with Ali Bassett, to replace him with another Golden Boot winner is also a credit to Cavalry's system and how how they create chances for a forward, how they support their forward, and heading into the playoffs, they'll need that because Cavalry, it feels like the one thing that's hurt them in past playoffs is these big games. They maybe don't have guys who can step up and deliver. And I think now between Moosey, who scored in the final last year, what Wershesky showed this regular season, Camargo. It feels like there's a few guys you look at like, okay, you can go out and do something in one of these big games.
All right, Alex, final question, very quick one on CPL playoffs before we move on. If Forge is not the team to win the title this season, which club is?
Oof, I'd say Cavalry. I think this is Cavalry's. If it's not Forge, it's Cavalry's revenge. I think they've just had too much heartbreak, and I think you see that sometimes with teams. It's, you need to get over the hump, and I think it's so fitting that for Cavalry, the road through the playoffs goes through Forge, because like it feels like for them to win a title, it has to go through Forge. Like if they win without beating Forge, it just wouldn't feel right. So I think Cavalry, they're going to use that to their advantage, and you just look at their roster. Like you have every position. You got Carducci in goal. He's won Golden Gloves. You got Klomp at the back, another incredible season, team of the season quality campaign. Fraser Aird was incredible. Shamit Shom was great in the midfield. You got Ali Musi, Warshewski, like just that's every line of the field. They got guys who can impact games. Tommy Wilden Jr., head coach, he's learned a lot. They played in Champions Cup this year, learned some important lessons. Like I think this Cavalry team has been building for a moment like this, and now, hey, like we said earlier, they only lost 4 times this year. Well, keep that going in the playoffs.
I think that's totally fair. I tend to agree with you. I want to just be different. I mean, I don't think really any of the 4 or 5 teams can go on this gauntlet. I think one of the most incredible stories in Canadian sports would be if Pacific went on and won all those away games to win it. I mean, it's just so unlikely. York's got a bit of a better chance with that home game. I think you could flip a coin between, if it's not Forge, Athletic Ottawa, and Cavalry. I think both have it. But I agree with you, Alex. I just think it's set up where they can do something dangerous. And if you saw it, I mean, we were at the final last year. I really felt like that was Cavalry's to win. They took the lead as well. I was right behind there. I remember because we were doing a vlog for it. So I had an angle where Ali Musi put that goal in. I literally was on the side of the net and watched that curler come in. It was a sweet shot. Producer T never used it though, because I recorded just on my, like, I didn't have like the proper settings on my phone to get it. So he didn't like the look of it. So he ended up just using the One Soccer one, but they played a really good game. I think they were really unlucky in the end to lose that to a Forge team that just knows how to win. So you mentioned it, revenge. I could see it coming back down. Tim Hortons Field hosting once again, and this time the script is switched a little bit. But we'll move on now to the Canadian Women's National Team. They have a match coming up Friday, October 25th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. They will be taking on Spain. That is going to be a friendly to watch. I mean, I'm really curious to see how this team's going to perform against a team like Spain with Buteles, Bonmati. They're littered with talent. What are you excited for this matchup? What are you hoping to learn? And after that, Alex, you and I are going to build a projected starting 11 like we usually do.
Yeah, I mean, what's exciting is it's good to know that, they begin the new World Cup cycle, because that's what it is. As we always love to use the term cycles, it's a new cycle. That 23 World Cup, 24 Olympics 1-year cycle is done. Now the focus is 2027 World Cup. And then 2028 Olympics, 2 huge tournaments, and no better way to new journey, Spain. You get such a good measuring stick, a team of, one that was the defending World Cup champions, one that maybe didn't have the Olympics they would have hoped, but still they were dangerous, and they remain a very, very good team. What I am a bit disappointed to see is that there aren't maybe as many new faces as there could have been, because I think if you start a new cycle, I think this is always a great moment to bring in some different players, maybe bring in some players who have been impressing at their club, some younger players who have done well to get some opportunity. I know it was tough because the NCAA is really busy right now, like it's college cup season coming up, so a lot of them are unavailable, but there's some still other interesting young players in the NWSL. Like, Zoe Burns this year has really found her feet with the Utah Royals. Maya Jones has grown into a good role with the San Diego Wave. Those are 2 youngsters that have, impressed me. I know if you wanted to bring more youngsters, you could have brought in like an Amanda West. Then you go over to Europe as well, and there's a bunch of intriguing younger faces that are kind of making waves. You'd want to maybe have a longer look at. But this remains a good Canadian team, and it's still there's still players like Olivia Smith, Simi Awujo, Jade Rose, and it'll be exciting to see those three. Really, I think those three feel like that's going to be the next generation of this team, right? Like the same way Buchanan, Fleming, Lawrence, all these players have kind of stepped up over the last 5 years. It feels like Rose, Awujo, and Smith are ready to kind of take that next step for Canada.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Lawrence there, 29 years old, 138 caps for Canada. This is just an insane amount. Jessie Fleming's 26, and she has 136. So, talking about that young group of players coming into their own, and now you get a bit of a younger generation mixed in with these talented players. It is exciting times, especially for a player like Olivia Smith. Alex and I did do an interview with her. Lovely to talk to. Really enjoyed chatting with her and seeing maybe where her future can lead with this Liverpool side. We also talked about, Alex, a couple of youngsters in Portugal that we would have expected getting called in to a 21 player squad to bump it up a little bit. We didn't see some of the younger players, but Aladu did return due to an injury. Are you excited that she got the call? Was there more, maybe a more deserving player somewhere, or did it just make sense because they're in Spain, Portugal's right there? They grabbed a player who's familiar with the squad and not like didn't ruffle really any feathers.
Yeah, I think Alidu's a no-brainer. I think she should have been there in the first place. She's a bit of a unique one. She's a bit older, right? She's like 28 now, 29. You want to get a look at her because you kind of, I mean, she might be 31, 32 by the next World Cup. But you may as well just get a look at a different face. Another one I could have looked at is her teammate, Chandra Davidson at Benfica. Davidson has had a bit of a quieter start to the year. She was very strong at the end of the year last year for Benfica, but still, I think you could have gotten a bit of a look at Davidson. She's been on a unique path. She was at like Sporting, then she went to the Netherlands, and then came back to Portugal with Benfica. So I think those ones would have been interesting. Caroline Kerrer is one I've been keeping an eye on. She's over in Germany with Bayer Leverkusen, and she scored like 3 or 4 goals to start the year with them. And she's 27, so again, a bit older. But there's always, I mean, in France, there's a bunch of fascinating youngsters you're probably looking at there that maybe you give a look and get inclusion. And yeah, I'm surprised, especially because it's based in Europe. At the very least, getting 22nd, 23rd, 24th player helps you training, right? It helps you have those extra bodies. And so it was a bit surprising not to see that.
Well, you're talking about players who are maybe a little bit older to take a chance on. Look at Chloe Lacasse. I mean, she made her debut for Canada. She's 31 right now. She made her debut in Canada in 2021, and she's been an excellent player. Just, Alex, you know, I already had this conversation, but we won't touch on it too much. But it just made no sense to me when you have the option to bring 23. You're in Europe. There are some unique profiles you could have brought in. Well, you know, why not give them a chance? I 100% agree. I would have loved to see those. If we mentioned those 2 players that you just mentioned come in, that's 23. That's a 23 player squad. That's a normal squad, and you could have got gave these players an opportunity to come in with the Canadian squad and see what they're made of. Anyways, we will move on to just simply making our starting 11. I'm excited for this, Alex, because you did say that, you know, this is a new cycle. Like, this is kind of a fresh start. Plus, you're taking on a juggernaut like Spain. So I'm curious to see how you look at this team. You know, as a player like Olivia Smith with her age and her profile, almost a shoe-in right now. You don't have Chloe Lacasse due to injury, like we just mentioned. Aladu came in for her. So how are you going to shuffle this team out? You know, Bev's not going to be on the touchline for this one. So I'm going to put up a starting 11 here, Alex. Well, an 11 that we will fill out and we can go through it. I did put it in the 3-4-3. We will start there. Do you still like that system? Is that the go-to, or would you like to see them maybe line up in a different way?
I'd say keep the 3-4-3 for now, because what I like about it is you've got some top center backs, right? And you can also, you got great wing backs, right? Like you got Lawrence, you got Carl, Riviere when healthy. Like you got options that you wouldn't mind seeing play higher up the field. So I think for now the back 3 makes sense. Although I guess we could argue if maybe a 3-5-2 is the better option, or if they should stick with this kind of 3-4-2-1.
All right, sounds good. We'll start. I guess we'll do keeper in the back 3. Sheridan, Rose, Gilles, and Buchanan. I mean, is there any surprises that you'd like to maybe see, or is that going to be it?
I'd love a look at Sabrina D'Angelo again this camp, because she's made a good move at club level. She joined Aston Villa this offseason, and she's had a good start to Aston Villa. Like, she's kept a couple clean sheets, if I'm not mistaken. She's been getting regular minutes that she wasn't getting at Arsenal, as we know. And Sheridan's had a bit of I think Sheridan had a red card recently in a huge Champions Cup game for San Diego that ended up seeing them getting eliminated from that competition because of a loss. San Diego's been struggling to end the year. I do wonder if maybe rewarding D'Angelo for her good play could be a way to go for in this camp.
Okay, I honestly didn't expect it, so I like the little surprise, and I'm gonna put her in. So I went to D'Angelo. We have Rose, Gilles, and Buchanan. But I'd say that's a bit of
straightforward. The back three, I would agree, is straightforward.
That's a bit, that's a bit of a surprise. So I'm curious to see if the thoughts are shared there. But I'll throw her in for now. Giving her the number 18 kit. I believe that's what she wears. Now we'll go into the wing backs. I'll go first, and then you can. Yeah, I'm just taking a look. I mean, Lawrence will be a lock. I'm just trying to see maybe who gets another look. I'm looking at Carl. I kind of feel like that's what I would do. Buchanan down the right, Carl down the left, but also I'm looking at Becky. Maybe we slide her down to the left instead with a different front three. So maybe I'm looking at, or maybe Lawrence down the left and Becky down the right is what I'd maybe go with. What do you think?
I think I'd go Lawrence right, Carl left.
Carl left?
Every time I watch Carl play for Washington, I watched her this weekend. Incredible performance. She had to deal with Mallory Swanson, and she held her own. She was. Every time I watch Swanson, she can absolutely terrorize defenders, and Carl held her own. So I think because of that, I see Carl. She deserves a look. And Becky's been in good form higher up the pitch for Louisville. She's been playing as a winger there. I mean, pretty sweet for Becky. She got an assist this weekend in a 1-0 win over her old club, the Portland Thorns, who traded her this summer. Like, that's a good story. Becky's obviously been loving life. I don't know if you saw that goal she scored recently too, where she megged the defend and then absolutely smashed it top corner. So Becky's been liking playing a little higher up the field, and I think we'll see when we get to the forwards where that might slot her in.
That's fair. I've always been a big fan of Carl. As soon as she came into the national team, I thought she'd be a really good fit down the left-hand side. She's very consistent. I mean, she does have 50. She quietly has 50 caps for Canada, Alex, which I feel like that creeped up. Like, I don't know. I would have guessed maybe she's more towards like the 20, 30 mark, but she has 50. She's playing really well. I do like that take. Is just, I mean, we have some versatile players on this team with, Becky, who can play as a wing back. If Lacasse was in here, she can do it as well. But in terms of traditional wing backs, I think Carl Lawrence is a great pick. So I have no arguments there. We will move on to the middle of the park, which this one can have some debate. I will go first once again and allow you to veto it if you see fit. Fleming's a lock. Do we go? I would say Awujo probably. Yeah, Fleming Awujo would be it.
Yeah, I think Fleming's the lock captain, but Awujo, she's been getting minutes to play at Man U, which is good. That's good. She's getting integrated, and she was great this summer. I've watched a few of Grosso's games lately for Chicago, and I'm liking what I'm seeing. Like, she's there with the old Jamaica coach, Lauren Donaldson, and she's been asked to play a lot more defensive than she ever did at Juventus, and it's helping her game. You can see some growth defensively, but I think that's something where maybe in the next year, if she continues that growth, maybe you go back and try Grosso Fleming, or some sort of combo. Maybe it's Fleming, Awujo, Grosso. Like, that's the trio you try. But I think for now, if you're kind of using a 3-5-2, let Awujo Fleming. I think they've got enough balance, and that allows you to put an extra forward on the field, and maybe down the road, depending on how things go, there's a future with the Fleming, Awujo, Grosso, and 2 up front.
I agree. Plus, if you look at this next cycle and players who are young that you can get into a starting 11, Awujo is 21. She's still very young. So is Smith, and I'm curious to see where you're going to go with this other one. And then Rose. Other than that, I believe like D'Angelo's 31, Buchanan's 28, Lawrence is 29, Gilles is 28. So you have players in their later 20s. Really, like that, the next 3 players I think are that young generation is Rose, Awujo, and Smith. So I am curious to see if you find a way to put Smith in. I'm going to. So I'll go with the front 3. What I'd like to see, I would have Smith. I'm curious to see I feel like you might go Evelyn Vienne as one, because I mean you usually like her. We have a lot of options with Rose, Heidema, Prince. Becky as well, Leon. I'm curious to see, Alex. I feel like you may go Smith, Becky, Prince.
Not quite.
Not quite. You're gonna go with Adrienne and Leon. You can throw her in there,
No, I'm going Smith, Vian, and Becky. I think.
Okay, all right. I second guessed myself. All right.
Smith is just, you can't ignore her. She's in too good of form. She scored 2 goals already for Liverpool. She's been their best player. Feels like every time she's on the field, she's been putting in like good performances, not just the goal, right? Where she's dangerous, creating chances. She's ready. Okay, can't deny her. Then the other two, I mean, Vian, she has something already like 5 goals, 4 assists to start the year. She's been playing well for Roma. It feels like just let her get a run up front for Canada. And I think heading into a new cycle, you saw it at the Olympics, right? Like Nichelle Prince actually has been in decent form for KC. I'm surprised they're stacked in the attack, but they've been getting her starts, and she kind of fits well because Chawinga is their biggest threat at KC, and Chawinga plays on the wing and kind of uses Prince as a bit of a target to play off of. But I just think Vian's form is too good. And you go Smith, Vian, then I think in terms of wingers, Becky's fit nicely at Louisville. You get a bit of experience, a bit of defensive responsibility. And yeah, I think that I would have included Lacasse in here somehow. I think if healthy, and I think it would have been a good debate of Lacasse versus Becky, especially now that both are in the NWSL, because Lacasse, of course, recently scored that hat trick, which was great from her and has been in good form. But now that she's injured, I think you kind of have to go for this front three.
If Lacasse was available, I'm a big Lacasse fan. I would have put her in the front three with Smith, and I like Evelyn Vian. I know that you've been a big fan of her for a while now, and you continue to say give her a chance. I think Prince is a great option up there as well. I really like the look of this team, and I also like the 3 players that we highlighted, the young players that need to be, I think, a part of this next core. They actually all kind of go in different positions. You have Rose at the back, you have Awujo in the middle, and then you have Smith up front. So they hit all 3 areas of this team, and it's very exciting. And I mean, especially if Jade Rose, we saw her immediately come into the picture, and she just blew me away. And I think she's going to get better and better and better, and will be she's a player I think that it can probably push towards like 150 caps by the time her national team career comes to an end. But it's an exciting team, Alex. It really is. And if this is the starting 11, how do you think they match up against Spain? And what are you going to kind of expect from it? Maybe a KG, fun, entertaining 2-2 kind of game? Maybe a 0-0 type of game, 1-0 type of game? What are you expecting?
Yeah, I mean, a few things I'd like about this squad is you get your 3 U21 players that they have. You'd get them on the field. You get, but also a mix of players in their prime. Carl Fleming, Vian are 26 and 27. Then, of course, Gilles Buchanan, 28. Lawrence, 29. And then Becky and D'Angelo, 30-31. It's like a balance, right? It's something where you can build. And I think they'd still match up well, because I think Awujo Fleming did a job at the Olympics. Awujo had her best game against like a Germany. She stepped up in a big game like that. I think you feel comfortable. And even the front 3, I think there's goals in there, and there's something exciting, right? Like Smith, she's dynamic. Becky, we've seen with the confidence, she can be such a versatile attacker. Vian is just such an annoying attacker to defend. You see it the way she's constantly running. It gives defenders headaches. I think there's enough balance all over the field. You're also defensively solid. I think they can give Spain a good game. So I think for me, this would be a good ideal of, you still get like a team that's, solid, that has played together, but you also get some new faces to build around for the next cycle.
100% agree. I thought it was important to get those 3 players in, like we mentioned, but there's a lot of balance to it. I think there's a lot to like. I'm just curious to see how this game's going to go, because when it came to watching this Spain team over the past few years, even the Barcelona team, Alex, it's been incredible. I was recently in Barcelona. I wanted to go watch the women's team play over there. My wife was really excited. It just didn't match up. They weren't playing. But we went to the Barcelona Museum, and it was filled with the accomplishments of that Barcelona team, which a good group of that players are on the Spanish team. And they've accomplished so much already in the women's game. And there was footage all over the place and highlighted just everything that they were able to achieve. So it's a team just littered with talent. It really is. I can't wait to see how Canada matches up against them, and I'm hoping for a good game. I like that they're away as well, going to Spain, and being able to get that experience will be good as well. Still a little disappointed that we didn't get the full 23 player squad and get some new faces in there, but that's all right. Alex, that's going to do it for us today. we touched on a lot with the CPL, the women. We have Alistair Johnston playing right now. We have David and Davies later today in the Champions League. So I'm assuming Alex has got as I do, but I can't really see it right now. We have the Celtic game in the background, and I guess you're going to watch both, but you have to imagine that Barcelona Bayern game is going to be probably where your attention is going to be, because the way that Atletico and Lille, I don't know, it's entertaining. And if Jonathan David can score once again against a top team from Madrid, follows up Real Madrid with a goal against Atletico, that's a story in itself. But in terms of just watching, I think an entertaining clash, Bayern Barca, I don't think you can really beat it.
Well, it's so many storylines. Lewandowski and Flick against their old clubs. Lewandowski's in ridiculous form at 37, scored like 12 goals this year in La Liga already, and a couple in Champions. You got, Barca Bayern who, beat Barca 8-2 a couple of years ago. Yeah. There's always that lingering, like there's some storylines there, I think, that will make this one a good one. So yeah, Barcelona Bayern, definitely good. But hey, don't sleep on Atletico, Lille, like one of the clubs that have constantly always been linked with David, and I think Simeone really admires him, is Atletico, because I think he sees David as an Atletico striker. Like, probably reminds him a lot of Griezmann, like the work rate, the way he moves around. Like, I think Simeone is thinking next year, like, man, it's going to be tough, because you hear Barcelona's interested in David, Inter Milan, Premier League clubs. But Atletico is probably thinking, why not us? And I'm sure they'll love to see him up close and personal, although they'll hope he doesn't have any goals for them today.
All right, my last point on it, because you make a lot of good points with the storylines. Recently, and take it with a grain of salt, there have been rumors linking Alphonso Davies to Real Madrid, of course, but now it's kind of, I feel like there's been some water thrown on that fire because of the form of Mendy, and maybe they don't really see that as an area to strengthen, especially with Carvajal's injury, that they're maybe now looking at the right backside. Trent Alexander-Arnold's been there. So those Davies to Madrid links, I think, are really dying down. Man United's been tossed in there, which I would hate, but also Barcelona has been tossed in there. So there's an opportunity right now for Alphonso Davies to kind of, show what he's made of. I don't really understand those links though, because of Balde.
Balde's great, but hey,
regardless,
Davies on the wing,
that's why
him and Yamal linking up. What a
grain of salt is why I said that. But also Barcelona, there's been some more legitimate links, I would say, with Jonathan David linked to Barcelona. So another interesting one to see maybe the future of Lewandowski but with his form, I believe he still has another year. So I don't know if it will quite link up of him leaving because of his age and contract running out, then David coming in on a free. David is a free agent, which I think could really interest a team like Atletico. And I like what you said there, Alex. And my last point will be on this. If you watch Atletico over the years, I've watched a ton of them. They're not always the most fun team, but they are a hardworking team. They defend from the front. And when we talk about what Jonathan David is good at off the ball, it's pressing. It's being able to be that front line. I do really think he would fit in well. He's a different profile from Griezmann, but can do some of the same things that I think Simeone would definitely admire. Plus, Ottawa boy, Atletico Ottawa, Atletico Madrid. You link the two. It's not crazy, but it's an exciting game for Canadians right now. Our exciting day for Canadians watching Alistair Johnston, followed by your choice of Davies, David, or both if you're able to make it work. But thank you guys for tuning in for today's live stream. Drop a like, drop a sub on your way out. Big shout out to TonyBet once again for being today's sponsor, and we will chat soon. Cheers, friends.